Welcome to Innovation and Leadership. I'm Jess Larson. Today on the show, we've got Ryan Tuerck.
So it created a lot of people using empty parking lots, and sometimes the guys that had some more stupidity would take it to the streets, which is obviously not ideal. And now it's grown into such a big sport where there are big time grassroots level support events that you can go to almost anywhere in the U.S. and Canada and in the world.
Ryan, thanks for making time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So for people who haven't seen you on the podium or haven't watched your YouTube antics and excitement, give us the 30-second rundown on Ryan Tuerck.
So my name is Ryan Tuerck. I am 34 years old. I've been racing or driving in motorsports for the better portion of my life. I grew up racing dirt bikes from about 9 to 19, and then immediately switched to motor racing or cars, and I've been doing drifting professionally for the last 15 years, and also around that building myself as a brand in the social media world and creating content or action motorsports content on YouTube and Facebook, garnering millions and millions of views.
Love it. And by the way, just because you do show up in a number of places, what are, like, if somebody's looking to see you put, a Ferrari engine in a Toyota Scion or these kind of things, right? What are some of the main shows? So I've seen you on Donut, see all the Network A stuff. What are some of the main ones for people to come see your stuff?
So yeah, the main places to come see the most recent stuff is typically the same places. I have a new outfit that I work with called Race Service, and they're essentially a media house or an automotive culture hub, I guess is the correct term, because they do a lot more than just media. And but they're the ones that are producing and filming the latest digital content show that I have going with my good friend Chris Forsberg, and it's sponsored by Gum Out and Black Magic, and it's actually being posted on a Donut channel, as well as Race Service, Gum Out, and the Black Magic Facebook channels. Great.
So for people who don't know the evolution of drifting and just how competitive it is now, can you give people a little bit of a scope for maybe folks who haven't followed the sport?
Sure. So drifting in the U.S. has been around for roughly 16, 17 years. It's a sport that started in Japan, and it was a professional series in Japan before it had come to the U.S. and started gaining a lot of interest. In the U.S., I think the first competition was when some organizers brought over the Japanese drivers to compete in Southern California, I think in 2002. And then the first professional U.S. series started, which is called Formula Drift, in 2004. And then local events and grassroots events started popping up in 2003. So it was a bit of a support system there from grassroots to professional that only took about a year and a half, which is pretty crazy. And now drifting has been in the U.S. From 2004 to 2018, and we're just finishing up, I think, I guess that would be the 15th professional season. And it's been a long journey. I have had the pleasure of kind of being at the right place at the right time, where my skills progressed as the sport progressed into a professional series. So I was right there to capitalize on already having a skill set that could compete at a professional level. But I wouldn't necessarily consider myself a professional back in those days, just because I've learned so much since then, and the sport has progressed so much since then. From a competitive standpoint.
Sure. And just for a little bit more background for people, and then I want to talk about gaining mastery and some of the insights of all the repetitions you've had to make to get to the level you got to. For people to understand how it's scored compared to other car racing that they might be more familiar with, F1 or rally, yep, or other motorsports they might have in mind, where you guys are getting out there and sliding sideways. Can you help people understand how you win at drifting?
Sure. So the quick and dirty is it's not a race. It's a judged sport, just like a lot of the games or a lot of the X Games and skateboarding, BMX, those kind of action sports, where you go into the weekend, you have open practice to get comfortable, get your car set up, and that's a Thursday. And then Friday, you go into your qualifying, and you get 2 non-consecutive laps of qualifying. Your best score moves you into a bracket of top 32, where first place qualifier goes head to head against the second place qualifier. And you basically go, top 32, top 16, top 8, semifinals to the finals. And within they call it the tandem competition, each driver both have a chance to lead and follow. And then you're judged on the different aspects of what drifting is. So angle, which is how sideways you are, your line, and your line is where the judges will put different clipping points around the course. A lot of them are at apexes. Some of them are up on walls where you don't want you to basically scrape your bumpers on. And a lot of that is for the action for the fans. And then the most subjective part of the judging criteria is the why am I trying to blank so hard right now? Sorry. Style. It's style, and style is the most points that you can get, and it's the most subjective. So it's essentially how aggressive you're driving, how hard you're driving, how exciting it looks, how many chances you're taking on track, and how perfect, I guess, your run is. So yeah. It's really hard to draw conclusions from that sometime, but when you watch drifting for a long enough time and you see a run and you compare it to another, and you're like, wow, that was really good, and that had a lot of style to it, is something that you can kind of compare it to like that.
Yeah.
And then in a tandem competition, you use all those aspects, and to beat your opponent, when you're the chase driver, you're essentially just trying to stay as close as possible to the lead driver in front of you, mimicking everything that he does on track. So when he makes a transition, you want to be transition right with him and be right up on his door or as close to his car as possible. And a lot of times in competition, cars will actually make contact during the middle of a run going 80 miles an hour sideways, and then just continue to push the limits and keep going without any mistakes. So it's a very exciting, high horsepower, smoke-filled action that happens on course that the fans love.
Yeah, can you talk about that, and especially how it's attracted big business, because it has been appealing to the guys that grew up maybe more my age, your age, and kind of it's not just a thing that punk teenagers are doing on the side, that it's really attracted the massive attention it has.
Yeah, it's grown quite a bit. Obviously, in the early days, it was hard to get to local events. For myself, I'd have to drive 5 hours to a local event once a month. So it created a lot of people using empty parking lots, and sometimes the guys that had some more stupidity would take it to the streets, which is obviously not ideal. And now it's grown into such a big sport where there are big time grassroots level support events that you can go to almost anywhere in the US and Canada and in the world to go drive safely and develop your skills in an environment where you're not going to get yourself in trouble.
You're such a good spokesperson for the industry nowadays, huh?
I've had a lot of time.
So for folks who have not driven 80 miles an hour sideways, skidding, sliding within, feet, in some cases inches of another car, can you talk about just some of your approaches and some of your mindset of how to gain that level of mastery where you can bring that kind of confidence that you're not going to die?
Yeah, it's just practice and seat time. As with everything, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard the term before. I forget exactly what it is, but does it take about 1 million hours or 10,000 hours to master any trade or any craft that you're into or hobby or whatever the case is? So with that being said, and using that mindset, it just takes practice time and experience. So you really just have to be able to have that time and those things under your belt where you can go to the track and practice and challenge yourself. Obviously you have to use your practice wisely, and in drifting, it's really tough because the costs are very high in the sport, being having a 15-year professional run, it still does the grassroots level. It's still very difficult and expensive, and there's not a ton of sponsors on that side to go out and practice every day. So when you go out and you do get to practice, or you do get to drive in competition, you want to utilize every second and every minute that you have to better yourself. So what I used to do I would watch professionals in Japan. This is still early on, where you couldn't really relate to any professional drivers in the US because there really weren't any. So I would always watch videos that I'd order online, and I'd dissect their driving style, how they would do something. And then when a practice day came where I was able to go to the track, I would go out and I would practice specific things that I had written down that I knew I needed to work on, or different areas that I knew I wasn't good at yet. So I would utilize every second that I had to try to develop my skills and progress in the fastest way possible. And progressing that way allows you to get more comfortable overall in a much faster way, and allows you to go. It allows a comfort level to where you can get up to a point where you're scraping walls with your bumper at, like I said, 80 miles an hour, and not really have your heart rate go up too much higher than it normally would, or not putting the car into the wall and crashing. So you can make these incremental adjustments without crashing when you're letting it all hang out.
Or like tape a baseball bat to the back of the car and go smash watermelons that are lined up, right?
or that's the fun stuff that you get to do. That's not highly competitive. It's more of a fun competition atmosphere.
What was that video called? Do you remember what video that one's in?
It was Game of Drift, and I think that was the second version that I had done. And just a blast. There's just different kooky ideas that I had come up with, and I was just thinking of, like, it'd be cool to do like a game of horse for cars, and it turned into Game of Drift, and we just come up with different funny, cool things that would be fun to do that you don't get to do in a professional atmosphere.
Yeah, well, and watching your videos, me and my friends, that even though we have we pretend to be adults now, and we have real jobs to feed our families, like we grew up loving like the Ken Blocks and Bucky Lassicks and these guys that you get to hang out with now. But I want to talk about a little bit more about getting to that level. So you order a video from Japan. Can you walk us through a story of a technique that took a while to master, that you feel like maybe kind of is one of those tricks that holds people back? Like, you look at skateboarding, and every rebellious teenager can go buy a skateboard and they can ride around, but like, what tiny percentage of them actually learn how to ollie and kickflip? You know what I mean? And that, like, you're just not a skateboarder until you can do that, right? Can you talk about just a specific technique where you're watching the video, you chunked it down, you're like, man, that's the one thing I need to get better at, and that you really had to work at, that it didn't come easily right off the bat?
Yeah, I'd say almost all aspects of drifting didn't come super easily. One of them, I guess, using the handbrake, or the emergency brake. We refer to it as the handbrake, and nowadays we have a separate set of brake calipers dedicated to just using the handbrake. And learning to use that properly took some time for me. I was actually better, I think, back in the early days, because I didn't know how to use it, so I wouldn't rely on it so much. But nowadays, it's actually something that is sometimes can be a bit of a downfall, because if you fall into the realm of using the handbrake too much, it can be just, it doesn't make your run very exciting. You're not extremely committed, and that's something that I find myself doing, that I just have to tell myself to knock it off when you're using a handbrake in a section of a track that totally doesn't call for it, and it can make your run less exciting. So you're talking, losing 5 points on a qualification score is huge. So,
and is that more for initiation, or what?
What's that?
What's the primary use of the handbrake? Is it for initiating when you're starting?
It's essentially to help. Yeah, I mean, the use of a handbrake should mainly be for either extending a drift into a long link into a next turn, where you can't really use the power of the car or the momentum of the car to link it, Or I'd say, yeah, an entry, of course, depending on the type of course that it is, and you know, if you can't use a flick entry, which is a lot more exciting to watch, then you can just do a lazy handbrake in. So essentially using a handbrake is to correct mistakes, as what I like to look at it as, because you shouldn't be using it that much unless unless you absolutely have to. Where in tandem, it's nice to use the handbrake, because if you're riding super close to another car, and you have more grip than them when you're on power, and you're going to maybe touch their car or get too close for comfort, you can just push the clutch in a little bit and just grab the handbrake really slightly. It's gonna slow you down just a tiny bit, regain your composure with the distance on the car in front of you, and not really make a big wonky looking mistake where the car looks like it's gonna straighten up.
I love it. See,
mastering the handbrake is,
yeah.
There's a lot involved with it, and in being good at it, it takes a long time. And then when you get good at it, sometimes you just rely on it a little too much.
See, we were the dumb kids in Canada, you know, on the snowy roads using the handbrakes for corners.
Yeah, and that's fine. You know, that's a good way to practice. That's how I practiced a lot at home in New Hampshire, was just in the snowy, icy parking lots. And again, this is before drifting really had much of a grassroots events around. So I would take the winters or the off season and just practice in empty parking lots, driving. You know, you're going like 5 miles an hour, maybe, just kind of cruising around in the snow, but it was still a blast.
Yeah. Well, I know we probably only got time for one more question here for the first half of the interview, and I really want to hear for you when you think about what so many guys like drifting. It's exciting, it's fun, it's cool. There's all these aspects to it that attract people, and there's plenty of people that dip their toe in the water. When you think about the folks who they do chunk things down enough and they do challenge themselves enough on their practicing, what do you think it is about them? What's different than the other folks who try but they really just don't make it? Or the people who would like to go on to be professionals and they are putting in the hours, but they're not achieving the level of mastery it takes to perform at your level, versus your friends that have made it. What do you see in common with the guys you're out competing with that maybe the other folks just never get to?
You know, a lot of times I think it's just a stroke of bad luck, and just your car not working properly. You know, money is always an issue with cars, just being so expensive, and you know, just being able to go run a regular weekend event with a car that is even at an amateur, a competitive amateur level, you're still going to spend, you know, maybe $2,000 to compete for a weekend. So even just going out to practice, you're still spending quite a decent amount of money. And if you blow an engine, then you're almost, you know, you're either done for the year, depending on what your financial situation is, or you are done for a couple weeks, half a season. It really depends. And I've seen a lot of talented drivers just kind of go out on that kind of thing, where they're just like, all right, I'm just going to take a step back because I've given it my all. I've gone down the road as far as I can take, my, you know, personally and financially, and it just didn't work out. So with that being said, there's so many different factors, and a lot of times it does come down to money, and that's a real bummer, but that's, you know, just the way it is.
Yeah.
In this sport and in motorsports in general.
And I think we should, you know, I want to talk a lot about marketing and the things you've learned on the second part of the interview. So let's talk about what people can do about it. Okay. So, again, just where's the best place on the web for people who want to come see this stuff and see what you've done?
So to watch content, I would say just, you know, search my name, Ryan Tuerck, in YouTube, and there's going to be a ton of videos that come up from Network A to Donut to Race Service, Gum Out, just all my different sponsors. You'll see a lot of different videos pop up that are some better than others, and some newer than others. But I've have a ton of content out there, and a lot of it's fun to watch, I hope.
That's great. And by the way, folks, his last name is spelled Tuerck. Well, this has been great. Everybody, please tune back in for the second half of the interview.